The cell was cold and dark, filled with the hum of the alien warship's engines. Behind the shimmering energy bars sat a human woman, her wrists locked in glowing chains. She did not cry. She did not scream. She did not beg for freedom. She simply sat there, watching, waiting, her eyes sharp and calm. The alien guards walked past her cell every hour, their armored feet clanging against the metal floor. They were tall and reptilian, their scales glimmering under the dim light, their voices deep and mocking. To them, she was nothing more than a fragile creature from a backward planet. They laughed whenever they looked at her, whispering insults in their harsh tongue. "She is weak," one guard muttered. "She is harmless," another replied. "She has not even spoken a word," said a third, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. They found it strange but amusing. Most prisoners begged, shouted, or cursed within their first hour of capture. But this human woman remained silent, her lips sealed like stone. The silence unsettled them, though they pretended otherwise. One guard leaned closer to her cell and hissed, "Why do you not speak, little human? Have you lost your tongue?" The woman only tilted her head slightly, her gaze piercing. The guard shivered, but quickly masked his fear with laughter. He turned away, but the weight of her stare lingered in his mind. As days passed, strange whispers spread among the guards. They noticed that whenever she was near, the ship's lights flickered faintly. Sometimes the doors opened half a second late, or the control panels glitched for no reason. The officers called it a coincidence, a minor malfunction. But the guards were not so sure. They began to wonder if the silent human had something to do with it. The other prisoners, locked in nearby cells, started watching her as well. There were creatures of many kinds, insectoid beings, scaled warriors, and feathered nomads. All had been loud and restless, but slowly their voices dimmed. They too felt the strange tension in the air. One prisoner, with glowing eyes, whispered through the bars, "She is not what she seems." The others nodded silently, afraid to say more. The guards, however, dismissed these fears with cruel laughter. "She is only flesh and bone," they said. "She is a prisoner, nothing more." And yet, none of them dared to stay too close to her cell for long. Something about her calmness unsettled even the bravest among them. At night, when the ship's corridors grew quiet, the woman's eyes reflected the dim light like polished steel. She would close her eyes and breathe slowly, as if listening to something deeper than the noise around her. Her silence was not weakness, it was patience, like a hunter waiting for the right moment. One evening, a young guard named Varric grew frustrated. He had heard enough of the rumors and whispers. Determined to prove his strength, he stormed to her cell. "Speak, human!" he roared, slamming his weapon against the bars. The sparks danced, but the woman did not flinch. Her steady gaze locked onto him. The silence stretched like a blade pressing against his throat. Varric's hands began to sweat, his chest tightened. He tried to laugh, but his voice cracked. Suddenly, as if in response, the ship's lights flickered and dimmed. The control panels on the wall sparked. Alarms briefly chirped and then died. The guards rushed to check, muttering about malfunctions. But the woman only leaned back in her cell, her lips curling into the faintest of smiles. Varric stepped away, his confidence shattered. What was that? He whispered to himself. No one answered him, but the other guards exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time they began to fear her. The captain of the guards scolded them, saying the ship was old and full of glitches, but even he avoided her gaze when he passed her cell. The human woman's silence had become heavier than chains. It pressed down on everyone, filling the corridors with unspoken tension. Still, she remained quiet. She spoke no words, revealed no secrets, but inside, her mind was sharp and awake. She was waiting, calculating, preparing, for she knew something the guards did not. The ship was listening, and when the time was right, it would answer to her. The alien guards thought she was only a prisoner, but in the shadows of the cell, her silence was the most dangerous weapon of all. the alien warship drifted through endless black space, its massive hull glowing faintly under the distant starlight. Inside, the corridors were alive with harsh metallic sounds, doors sliding, guards marching, prisoners groaning in their cells. But beneath all that noise, there was another sound, quieter, harder to notice. A whisper, not from lips, but from the ship itself. The human woman sat in her cell, silent as ever, her chains glowing faintly in the dim light. Her eyes were half closed, but she was not asleep. She was listening. Every flicker of light, every strange pause in the engines, every hum in the walls, she noticed. The ship was speaking to her, in a language of silence and signal. The guards had begun to argue among themselves. Another door failed today, one grumbled. The systems are breaking down, another replied. The ship is ancient, it needs repair. Their captain insisted, but still, unease crept into their voices. For the malfunctions always seemed to happen near her cell. The prisoners started whispering too, passing rumors through the energy bars of their cells. "She is cursed," muttered one insectoid prisoner, his antennae twitching nervously. "No," said another, his voice trembling. "She is chosen." They watched the human woman carefully, wondering who she truly was. Some believed she was a spy, others thought she was a weapon. But no one could ignore the strange pull she carried. One night, when most of the guards were asleep, a feathered alien prisoner leaned close to his bars and whispered. "I saw her eyes glow in the dark," another prisoner hissed. "Lies." But the feathered one shook his head. "No, I swear, the ship listens to her." The words spread like fire through the prison block, fear mixed with hope, for if the ship truly listened to her, perhaps their fates could change. The guards noticed the whispers too, and their patience began to wear thin. They banged on the cells, silencing the prisoners with threats of punishment. But when the noises stopped, the whispers always returned, quiet, endless, crawling through the dark. One of the younger guards, Varek, the same one who had once tried to make her speak, grew restless. At night he dreamed of her face, her calm stare, her faint smile. The memory burned in his mind. He began to believe the rumors, though he told no one. Sometimes, he thought he heard her voice in his head, a soft command he could not understand. It frightened him, but it also fascinated him. The woman herself never spoke, but her silence was no longer empty. It was alive, filled with meaning that none could name. When the engines stuttered, she breathed in calmly. When the lights flickered, her eyes sharpened. She was in tune with the ship, like a musician with her instrument. The captain of the guards ordered a check of all systems. Teams of engineers marched through the corridors, testing panels and repairing circuits. But no matter what they fixed, the malfunctions returned. Doors jammed, alarms rang for no reason. Gravity flickered in the lower decks. The engineers grew nervous, muttering that the ship itself was resisting them. Still, the human remained in her cell, unmoved. The guards grew angry, frustrated, and afraid. They began to watch her as though she were a dangerous predator rather than a weak prisoner. Every small movement of hers felt like a threat. Every slow breath carried weight. Then, one evening, something happened that none could ignore. A sudden blackout swept through the ship, plunging the prison deck into complete darkness. For several long minutes, there was no sound except the breathing of the prisoners and the quickened steps of the guards. The emergency lights failed to respond. The energy bars on the cells flickered. And in that heavy silence, the woman opened her eyes. They glowed faintly in the dark, like twin stars burning in the shadows. The prisoners gasped, some whispering prayers, others pressing themselves against the far corners of their cells. The guards froze, their weapons trembling in their hands. Then, slowly the lights returned, the systems rebooted, and the ship roared back to life. But none of them could forget what they had seen. Her eyes, alive with a power they could not explain. From that moment, the whispers changed. No longer just fear, there was now belief. She is not a prisoner, they said. She is something greater. The ship itself seemed to agree, for its hum grew louder when she was near, almost like a heartbeat, answering hers. Varek was the first to break the silence after the blackout. He whispered to another guard, his voice shaking, "The ship knows her." The words spread quickly, moving faster than the guards could silence them. And soon, even the bravest of soldiers began to doubt their own strength. The human woman, chained and silent, gave nothing away. She sat with calm patience, her faint smile returning, for she knew the truth none of them understood yet. The ship was waking, and it was waking for her. The whispers in the prison deck would not stop, no matter how often the guards shouted or struck their weapons against the cell bars. The rumors returned like a shadow. The human woman sat silently, her calm eyes fixed on nothing and everything. At once, it was this silence that drove the guards mad, more than her chains, more than the rumors. One evening, when the hum of the engines filled the air, a young alien guard named Kor finally snapped. He was not like Varek, who had grown fearful of the woman. Kor was proud, hot-blooded, and eager to prove himself. He was tired of the other guards whispering about her, tired of the prisoners' fearful stares. To him, the woman was only flesh and bone, a weak creature pretending to be more. He would show them all that she was nothing. He marched to her cell, his heavy boots echoing across the corridor. The other guards looked up, some frowning, some smirking. "Leave her, Kor," one of them muttered. "She is strange." But Kor laughed, his sharp teeth glinting. "Strange? She is silent because she is afraid. I will make her scream." The prisoners stirred, leaning closer to their bars. They had seen guards mock her before, but this felt different, heavier. A storm was building in the corridor, and all of them could feel it. Kor slammed his clawed hand against the energy bars, sparks flying. "Human!" he barked. "Look at me when I speak." The woman raised her eyes slowly. Calm, steady, unshaken, Kor sneered. "So you do hear, so you do see, yet you choose silence? You think this makes you strong?" She said nothing, her lips sealed as always. Her gaze cut through him like a blade, and for a moment his chest tightened. But his pride pushed the fear down. He laughed loudly, forcing the sound to cover his unease. "Tell me, little prisoner," he roared. "What are you hiding? What power do you think you have?" Still, she did not speak. Her silence pressed on him, and the other guards shifted uneasily. The prisoners whispered to each other, their voices like wind in the dark. "She waits," one muttered. "Ship waits with her." Anger burned in Kor's chest. He wanted to break her silence, to prove she was nothing more than a fragile creature. He reached for the panel on the wall, pressing his claw against it, lowering the energy barrier for just a moment. The other guards shouted in alarm, "Kor, stop! Are you mad?" But Kor ignored them, stepping into her cell, his weapon raised. The air inside the cell felt different, heavier, charged with something unseen. He sneered, trying to mask the sudden weight pressing against him. "Speak," he hissed, pointing the weapon at her head, "or I will make you bleed." The woman slowly lifted her gaze fully to his. Her eyes glimmered faintly in the dim light. She tilted her head ever so slightly, as though measuring him. Then without a word, the ship answered. The lights above flickered, then flared bright, blinding. The weapon in Kor's hand sparked violently and shut down. The door of the cell sealed itself shut with a heavy clang, trapping him inside. The alarm screamed across the deck, warning of a system override. Kor stumbled backward, his chest heaving. The guards outside hammered against the sealed door, shouting, "What happened?" "The system locked. It's her. It's the prisoner." Another cried, panic rising. The woman never moved, never spoke. She only watched Kor with calm, piercing eyes. The ship hummed louder now, its walls vibrating like a heartbeat. Kor dropped his useless weapon, sweat dripping down his scaled face. He finally understood what the others had whispered. The ship was not broken, it was listening. Open. "The door," he gasped, his pride shattered. The woman remained silent, her faint smile curling at the edge of her lips. The ship released the lock only when she blinked. As if obeying her unspoken command, the cell door slid open with a hiss. And Kor stumbled out, collapsing on the floor, his hands shaking. The other guards dragged him away, their faces pale with fear. Not one of them dared look into her eyes. The prisoners were silent at first, then one whispered, "She is the ship's master," another answered. "No, she is its voice." From that day forward, none of the guards dared to step close to her cell. Even the captain avoided her gaze. The prisoners, however, watched her with new eyes, not just fear, but also hope. For if she could command the ship without speaking a word, perhaps she could change their fate in the darkness. The human woman closed her eyes once more. Her breathing was calm, her silence steady. She had revealed only a glimpse of her connection, just enough to plant terror in the hearts of her captors. But the time for silence would not last forever. Soon, her voice would rise, and when it did, the ship would no longer belong to them. The alien warship sailed through endless space, its vast shadow stretching across the stars. Inside the prison deck, the air was heavier than ever, filled with fear and whispers. No one forgot what had happened to guard Kor. He had entered the human woman's cell full of pride, and he had crawled out broken, trembling. Since that day, none of the guards dared to step too close to her. The prisoners, meanwhile, watched her with new eyes, a strange mix of awe and hope. But the woman remained silent, her calm expression unchanged. She sat with her eyes half closed, listening to the quiet hum of the ship. Every vibration in the walls, every flicker of light, every shift in the engines. She felt them as though they were her own heartbeat. She was waiting, and the ship was waiting with her. Then, the moment came. The warship was ambushed. From the darkness of space, enemy vessels appeared, their weapons blazing. The alarms howled across every deck, red lights flashing wildly. The alien crew shouted orders, scrambling to defend the ship. But something was wrong, terribly wrong. The ship was not responding. The captain of the guards roared at the control panels, slamming his claws into the glowing screens. "Shields! Shields up!" He bellowed, but the panels flickered and went dark. "Engines, fire the cannons!" shouted another officer. Nothing happened. The ship ignored them. Panic spread like fire. The mighty warship was frozen, refusing to fight. The prisoners clung to their cells as the ship shook under enemy fire. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Smoke filled the corridors. Guards ran in chaos, shouting and cursing. And through it all, the woman sat quietly in her cell, her chains glowing faintly, her eyes opened slowly. Sharp and calm, she breathed in. Steady and unafraid. Another blast rocked the ship, throwing guards off their feet. The captain's voice broke into panic. "The ship won't listen. It's dead." But then, for the first time, the woman spoke. Her voice was soft, steady, and clear. "Shield protocol, activate." The words were simple, yet they carried weight. The ship answered instantly, with a deep roar. Glowing barriers flared to life around the vessel, deflecting the enemy fire. The guards froze in shock. Staring at the woman's cell, the prisoners gasped, their eyes wide with awe. She had spoken, and the ship had obeyed. The enemy's attack struck again, but the shields held strong. The crew scrambled back to their posts, pressing buttons, shouting commands, but none of their orders worked. The panel stayed dark for them. Only her voice had awakened the warship. The human woman stood slowly, her chains rattling as she rose. Her voice carried across the corridor, calm and commanding. "Target nearest hostile vessel. Fire main cannons." The walls vibrated as the ship responded. The cannons lit up with burning energy and unleashed their fury. A massive beam tore through the darkness, striking the enemy ship and shattering it into pieces. The guards fell silent, their jaws tight with disbelief. The captain staggered back, whispering, "Impossible. She commands the ship." The prisoners cheered softly, hope sparking in their voices. Some pressed their hands against the energy bars. Whispering her words to themselves, as though they were magic, the woman lowered her gaze. Her calm smile faint. She had waited long for this moment. Her silence had hidden the truth. But now her voice had awakened it. The warship was not broken. It had simply been waiting for her command. It was her ship, not theirs. The guards tried to deny it. She hacked the system. One shouted desperately, "No, the ship is broken." Another cried, but their voices trembled with fear, for deep inside, they knew the truth. The ship did not recognize them. It recognized her as more enemy vessels closed in. The woman spoke again. Evasive maneuvers, shift pattern delta. The massive warship moved smoothly, dodging enemy fire as though guided by her thoughts. The prisoners clung to their cells, amazed. The guards stared, helpless. They were no longer masters of their own vessel. The human woman stepped closer to the energy barrier of her cell. The glow reflected in her sharp eyes. Her voice was calm but filled with strength. "This ship belongs to me, it always has." And with each word, the ship pulsed with light, as though alive, as though agreeing. The battle raged outside. But inside the prison deck, the true war had already been decided. No one looked at her as just a prisoner anymore. Not the guards, not the prisoners, not even the ship itself. Her silence had been the calm before the storm. Now her voice was the storm itself. When the final enemy ship exploded into fire, the warship steadied, floating victorious in the void. The crew looked around in fear and awe, knowing they had not saved themselves. It was her, the silent prisoner, who had become the commander. The guards exchanged fearful glances, their claws trembling on their weapons, but none of them dared to raise a hand. The ship would not allow it. The woman sat back down slowly, her eyes calm once more. Her voice had awakened the ship, but she was not finished yet. This was only the beginning. The guards thought they still held her prisoner, but in truth, they were now the ones trapped on a ship that no longer belonged to them. Asterisk. The prison deck had gone silent after the battle. Smoke still drifted from the walls. Sparks hissed from damaged panels. But no one moved. Every guard, every prisoner, even the captain himself, all of them stared at the human woman. She had spoken only a handful of words. And the warship had bent to her will. The same ship that ignored its crew. The same ship that had refused all orders until she commanded. The guards were terrified. They tightened their grips on their weapons, but did not raise them. They knew it would be useless. The warship no longer listened to them. It listened to her. The captain of the guards finally broke the silence. His voice was rough and unsteady. "Who are you, human?" he demanded. "What trick is this? How do you control our ship?" The woman lifted her eyes slowly, calm and unshaken. She did not answer him directly. Instead, she said softly, "This ship remembers me." Her words rippled through the prisoners, sending chills down their spines. The guards shook their heads in denial. "Impossible," one growled. "She is only a prisoner." But the truth was already heavy in the air, impossible to deny. The woman stood, her chains rattling, her gaze steady. Long ago, before the alien warlords had claimed the vessel, before it became their weapon of fear, she had been there. Her people had helped design the ship. It was not just a machine. It was alive, built with an AI system that could recognize and bond with voices. And her voice had been imprinted into its core long ago. The warship was more than metal and circuits. It was a memory, and in that memory, she was still its commander. "You think you stole this ship," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "But you never truly controlled it. It was waiting, locked, refusing to give itself to you." Her eyes glimmered. "It was waiting for me." The guards trembled, their pride crumbling. One of them shouted desperately, "You lie. You are no commander. You are nothing." But even as he spoke, the lights around the deck pulsed in rhythm with her voice. The ship itself seemed to answer her words, silencing his denial. The prisoners leaned forward, hope flickering in their tired eyes. For years they had lived under the cruelty of their captors. Now they saw those same captors trembling like frightened children. They saw power shift before their very eyes. The captain slammed his claws against the wall, his voice cracking with anger and fear. "You will not take this ship from us. It belongs to the Empire." The woman tilted her head slightly. "No," she said, her voice like steel. "It belongs to those who built it. It belongs to me." At her words, the chains on her wrists flickered, then disengaged with a metallic hiss. The guards gasped as the shackles fell to the floor, glowing faintly before shutting down. The ship itself had released her. She rubbed her wrists calmly, her faint smile returning. "I was your prisoner," she said softly, "but I was always the ship's commander." The guards backed away, fear etched deep into their scaled faces. Some raised their weapons out of desperation, but the ship reacted instantly, panels along. The walls lit up. Energy cannons unfolded from the ceiling, aimed directly at them. The guards froze, their weapons trembling. The ship was protecting her. Obeying her will without a single word, the prisoners erupted in whispers, their voices filled with awe. "She commands it," one muttered. "She is the ship," another whispered. For the first time in years, hope burned in their hearts. The captain roared in desperation. "Even if the ship listens to you, you cannot win. You are one human against an army." The woman stepped forward, the glow of the ship's lights reflecting in her calm eyes. "I do not need an army," she replied. "I have the ship." Her voice carried across the prison deck, steady, powerful, undeniable, and the ship answered her with a deep hum, as though alive, as though proud. The truth was no longer hidden. She was not a weak human, not a helpless prisoner. She was the voice the ship had been waiting for, and now, both prisoners and guards knew it. The guards had lost their greatest weapon. The prisoners had found their greatest hope, and the woman had revealed her true place, not as captive, but as commander. The balance of power had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same again. She turned her gaze toward the stars beyond the cell bars. Her calm smile held a promise. "This is only the beginning," she whispered, and the ship's lights pulsed once more, like a heartbeat answering hers. Asterisk. The prison deck no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a throne room. The guards, once proud and cruel, now stood frozen in fear. The prisoners, once hopeless and broken, now whispered with awe. And at the center of it all stood the human woman, the ship's true commander. Her chains had fallen. The ship's systems had awakened. Every wall, every panel, every glowing light seemed to wait for her voice. The guards tightened their weapons, their claws trembling. They wanted to fight, but the ship itself betrayed them. Doors sealed without warning, weapons powered down, and security systems refused their commands. The captain roared, "Stand your ground. She is only one human." But his voice carried no power anymore. The ship silenced him with a deep hum, its cannons lowering from the ceiling, glowing with energy. Every weapon was pointed not at her, but at them. The guards understood. They were no longer the masters. They were the prisoners now. The woman stepped forward, her eyes sharp, her calm voice cutting through the tension. "Release the cells," she commanded. The prison doors hissed, one after another, energy fields shutting down. The prisoners staggered out, their eyes wide with disbelief. For years they had dreamed of freedom, and now it came with a single sentence from her lips. Some fell to their knees, whispering thanks. Others pressed their hands to their hearts, alien voices from many worlds. United in a single breath of hope, the guards stepped back in terror, their numbers suddenly meaningless against a ship that no longer obeyed them. One of the freed prisoners, a feathered nomad with silver eyes, spoke carefully. You are our savior." The woman shook her head gently. "I am not here to save you," she said. "I am here to take back what is mine." But her calm words carried power, and to the prisoners, that was salvation enough. The captain, desperate, lunged forward with his weapon raised. "Kill her," he screamed. "Kill her before she takes everything." But before his weapon could fire, the floor beneath him glowed with energy. The ship activated a force field, locking his body in place. He struggled, snarling, his pride collapsing into fear. The woman turned her gaze toward him. Her voice cold. "This ship was never yours," she said, "and neither are they." At her signal, the cannons rotated, targeting the guards. The alien soldiers dropped their weapons. Claws shaking, the prisoners stepped forward, no longer weak, no longer broken. They were ready to rise, emboldened by the ship's protection. The woman raised her voice, calm and steady. "Those who oppressed will now face the chains they forced on others." Instantly, the cells reactivated, but this time the glowing bars locked around the guards, one by one. The oppressors were dragged backward by the ship's systems, slammed into cells, and imprisoned by their own technology. The prisoners cheered, their voices echoing through the deck like thunder. The tables had turned. The hunters were now caged, the masters now slaves. The guards shouted curses, but their words meant nothing. They could no longer command fear. Their power had crumbled to dust. The woman stood tall at the center of it all, her faint smile returning. She did not raise her hands. She did not need to. The ship answered her every thought, every command. Her silence had once been her shield. Now her voice was her sword. The freed prisoners gathered around her, their eyes filled with questions. "Who are you?" One asked, his voice trembling with respect. She looked at them, her expression calm. "I am a human," she said softly. "But more than that, I am the voice this ship remembers." Her words carried weight, and the prisoners bowed their heads. They had been under the cruelty of the Empire for too long. And now they had found someone who could stand against it. The ship pulsed with light, as though alive, as though proud of her. Its engines roared with new strength, carrying them forward into the stars. For the first time, the prisoners felt not like captives on a warship, but like crew members of something greater. The captain roared from his new cell, his claws gripping the glowing bars. "You think you've won, human? You think this ship makes you powerful? The Empire will come for you. They will burn you and everything you touch." The woman turned her head slightly, her calm eyes locking onto him. "Let them come," she whispered, her voice sharp as steel. "The ship and I are ready." The prisoners cheered louder, their voices shaking the walls. The guards remained trapped, powerless, broken. The ship sailed on, free of their control. Bound to the voice it was born to serve. The tables had turned, the game had changed, and the galaxy itself would soon learn what it meant to face a human with a warship at her command. The warship drifted in the silence of space, its massive hull scarred from battle, yet glowing with power inside. The prison deck no longer belonged to the guards. They sat in the very cells they once used to break others, their eyes filled with rage and fear. Meanwhile, the freed prisoners stood tall, their backs straighter than they had been in years. And at the heart of it all stood the human woman, the ship's true voice. The ship pulsed with life, every light glowing brighter, every engine humming stronger. It was no longer a tool of the Empire. It was alive with purpose. Its loyalty belonged to her alone. She looked across the deck, her calm eyes scanning prisoners and captors alike. Her faint smile carried both promise and warning. The captain of the guards snarled from his cell, "You will not escape the Empire." "Human," he growled, his claws clenching the glowing bars. "The fleet will come. They will crush you, and no ship will save you then." His words carried defiance, but his voice shook with fear. The woman stepped closer, her gaze steady. "You still do not understand," she said softly. "I am not the one trapped here. You are." Her words struck deeper than any weapon. The captain roared, slamming his claws against the barrier, but the ship pulsed in warning, sending a shock through his body. He collapsed back onto the floor, groaning. The prisoners laughed quietly, the sound of justice finally reaching their ears. The woman turned her gaze to the freed captives. "You are no longer prisoners," she said, her voice steady. "You are survivors, you are witnesses, And now you are free. Some looked at her with disbelief. Some with tears, others with fierce loyalty. For the first time, hope was not a distant dream. It was real, standing before them. But she was not finished. She raised her voice again, calm yet commanding. This ship belongs to none but those who honor freedom, and it will not serve cruelty again. The ship pulsed, its lights glowing in agreement, its cannons folding neatly back into their housings as though bowing to her words. One of the prisoners, the feathered nomad with silver eyes, stepped forward cautiously. "Commander," he said, his voice trembling with respect, "what will you do now? Where will you take us?" The woman lifted her eyes toward the stars, her expression calm yet sharp. "There are many still in chains," she said, "many still hunted, many who believe they are forgotten." Her gaze hardened. "We will remind the galaxy that humans do not bow, and neither does this ship." The prisoners erupted in cheers, their voices rising like a storm. The guards shrank in their cells, their pride shattered, their empire's name no longer able to protect them. The balance of power had shifted completely, and none could deny it. The woman moved to the control deck, escorted by prisoners who now walked like soldiers beside her. When she stepped into the command chamber, the entire ship seemed to breathe. The panels lit up on their own. The captain's chair turned slowly to face her. She sat down, her hands resting lightly on the arms of the chair. The warship's systems awakened fully, glowing symbols running across every screen. The ship's "I" spoke at last, its voice deep and resonant. "Commander recognized," it said, awaiting orders. The crew, no longer guards, no longer prisoners, but witnesses, stared in awe. The woman leaned back slightly, her faint smile sharp as a blade. "Set a course," she commanded, her voice calm yet powerful. "Not away from danger, but toward it." The ship's engines roared in answer, the stars shifting as the massive vessel turned. Her warship was no longer a weapon of the Empire. It was her weapon now, her voice given form in steel and fire. The captain from his cell shouted one last desperate warning. "You will start a war you cannot win." The woman's eyes narrowed, her voice cutting through the air like steel. "Then let it begin," she said, "because this time, the galaxy will hear a human's voice." The ship thundered forward, engines blazing, carrying its new commander into the dark unknown. Behind her, the prisoners stood with pride, ready to follow wherever she led. Before her, the endless stars stretched wide, filled with empires, fleets, and enemies who had no idea what was coming. The alien guards had once thought she was only a prisoner. Now the galaxy would learn the truth. She was not their captive. She was their commander, and her rise had only just begun. Asterisk.